So told Timothy, he said, preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering and doctrine, for the time will come when men will not endure sound doctrine. It goes on to say they will heap upon themselves having itching ears. When any subject that we deal with in the Bible, we always want to do so with kindness. We always want to do so with love. Paul told the Ephesians, he says to preach the truth in love. And I think that ought to be our goal. That ought to be what we try to do in all that we say and we do in our lives. Be kind. What I want to do today, I want to look at the subject of, is it a sin to dance? Is it a sin to dance? I must admit that I've never danced. I don't have much rhythm, I don't guess. I've never tried to dance. It's sort of like my singing. It'd probably be pretty pitiful if I tried. So I'm not speaking from experience. Everything that I'm going to say today, I'm speaking from a biblical standpoint. When you look at the idea of dancing, does God really have a problem with dancing? Well, most of the world would say no. Does the Bible teach on the subject? Well, I believe that He does. And we're going to examine that today. And maybe we can find out if it's dangerous or not. And all I want you to do for the next 30, 35, 40 minutes with me is just have an open mind. Listen to what I am going to present about this very important doctrine. First of all, I want you to notice in the New Testament, we find the word lasciviousness. Someone told me the other day, when I said I was going to preach on it, they said the word dancing is not in the Bible. And the English word is not there, but the Greek word is there. And it is the word aselgia, and aselgia is defined by Thayer as unbridled lust, wanton acts or manners, including filthy words, indecent bodily movements, unchaste, the handling of males and females. The English word lasciviousness is defined as exciting sexual desires. Now, I want you to notice that we've got to be careful as a Christian that we always we take steps that will help us to remain pure and be a good example. Anything which excites the lust of the flesh, words, bodily movements, unchaste handling of each other, is therefore considered sinful. Now, of course, this applies to the stirring up of sexual desires and the sensual pleasures outside the bonds of marriage. Now, I want to define dance because sometimes, if you look at the word dance in the Old Testament, sometimes it is a dance of a celebratory. That is, they won a victory and they come in and that's not the kind of dance that we're talking about today. The word dance covers a broad range of actions. It can be rhythmic movement of time to music. It can be movement that expresses feelings just as joy or enthusiasm. Or it can be complex movements designed to create motions in another person. These things are caused by and for the purpose of excitement of lust. Now, someone's going to say, what somebody else thinks I can't control. If I'm wearing something and it is modest and somebody's got a bad thought, that's on them. That would be correct. But if you're wearing something that is not modest, if you're showing things that you shouldn't be showing, and it causes lust in a man's heart or a woman's heart, however it is, then that's on you. And that's what I want to look at, the excitement of lust. The excitement of lust between those not married is sinful, condemned by Jesus. One of the questions that had turned into me not too long ago, and we'll probably deal with in the near future, is it wrong to lust for another person? It must therefore be wrong to arouse lust in another person. And it is. But someone asked me, is lusting in your heart the same as committing adultery? No, it's not. You have to commit the physical act. But if you do something, if you move in such a way, you dress in such a way that causes someone to lust in their heart, then you have caused that person to sin in the way that you have dressed, in the way that you have participated in whatever that might be. Matthew 5, 28 and 29. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you, for it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. What's Jesus saying? He's not saying that we ought to take awe and bore our eyes out. What He's saying is that whatever it is that is causing us a problem, we need to get rid of it. We need to get rid of it. If it's dancing, if it's the way that we dress, immodesty, then we need to quit doing that, because we can cause the excitement of lust in another person's heart, and thus we're guilty of sin. Now, let's look at the modern dance in the Bible. As we said, that dance incites human emotions. Thus, we can expect the dance to excite sexual thoughts. Unmarried Christians are not to be involved in lustful passion. 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 3 and 5. Passion is be to put to death. Colossians 3 and verse 5. Anything that's going to cause this passion, this incitement of lust, you're supposed to get rid of it. You're supposed to mortify it. You're supposed to put it to death. And such thoughts are not to be associated with Christians. Ephesians 5, verse 3. So it's not the issue of, do I like to dance with my wife at home? What you do in the privacy of your home between a husband and wife is no business of ours. But what you do that's going to cause someone other than your husband and your wife to lust after you, it is wrong, it is sinful, and it causes shame upon the church. Now, what I want to do, I want to look at some of the modern dance today. I want to give you some facts and figures. One of the things that I've noticed is an increase now is a dance at weddings, the wedding dance, the first day. And several people asked me, would I do that? No, I wouldn't do that. I have refused to do that. I won't do that. Somebody says, oh, that's got, what would be wrong with a husband and wife dancing at a wedding? Well, if a husband and wife dances at a wedding, and that's one thing. But what about if I get up as a preacher, as a Christian, and dance? What's that going to show the crowd? What kind of influence am I going to have upon the audience when they know who I am and they know what I stand for? Somebody says, yeah, that's being ridiculous. Well, I'm afraid it doesn't. I'm afraid that it doesn't work that way. I believe that our influence, that we're to be an example wherever we go. Now, let's ask the question, or let's look at this consideration. You know the reason I chose to preach this in January instead of April or May? Because right now is when folks are already picking out their dresses and they're already got this thing planned and they're already involved in it. In years past, there was hardly any Christian who would openly defend dancing. The preachers of times past would always taught that it was sinful, and usually the congregations would concur. This was not an issue years ago. What has changed? What's happened? Are things different today? Has dancing cleaned up its act? Were the preachers of yesterday all wrong when they preached on dancing? When they preached on immodesty? Brethren, I promise you, well, you know it better than I. If you go to the store and try to buy a dress, not you men, but you ladies, you try to find a modest dress. Isn't it hard to find a modest dress? Either the whole front's out or the whole back's out, or some of them may be front and back out. It's hard to find modest dress. I understand all of that. Well, that's the reason as Christians we have to put forth extra effort. We have to do the things that we need to do to act right, talk right, and to look right as a Christian. Now, what about the prom? I want to show you something, and I did not call him and get permission, but I don't think he would mind, so I gave him credit for it. This was when he was the preacher at Glasgow, Kentucky. And this is what he says on his website. Listen to this. In years past, there was hardly any Christian who would openly defend. Then, notice what he says at the bottom. Our local proms have seen this. Guys and girls renting cabins at State Park where some spent the night drinking and engaging in sexual immorality. Public intoxication and arrests made by the local police force. When I was in Atlanta several years ago, we had a city cop. He was the police chief that was a member of our congregation. His name was Melvin Denny. He's no longer alive. Melvin Denny said one time in our elders and deacons meeting, he said, the night that I dread more than any other night of the year is prom night. He said because there's more ungodly behavior, there's more activity going on among young people, and he said most of the time parents are blind to it, just don't know it. Notice, he goes on to say, dirty dancing, and that's the way I describe it. To get specific would probably be offensive. He said, performed on the chaperone dance floor, which is broadcast over a local cable system. Chaperone. Now listen to this as he goes on. He says, immodest, revealing clothes worn, intended to solicit the attention of the opposite sex. And I remember overhearing two girls trying to outdo each other as to which was showing more cleavage. Brethren, the Christians, do they talk like that? Do they reason like that? Would you want your daughters to think like this? How can we show more? Also on this web page, he says, young people lying to their parents about where their whereabouts, where they stay out all evening and return home in the morning. Parents who told their children that they had to go. Can you imagine a parent telling their children they have to go to the prom? You ought to be telling your children not to go to the prom. You ought to be telling your children, and you look at the latter part of this, that they needed to go to the prom with the young people, even other children. What? Sometimes, brethren, our minds are poisoned with the world's standards and the way the world thinks. And it ought not be that way. I'm telling you something. I grew up at Monterey, and I'm going to listen to this. When I was in school, the principal, Frank Medley, who was not a member of the church, he would not allow prom and dancing. So they had to have a junior and senior banquet. You know, a bunch of teenagers and a bunch of young people were so mad at Frank Medley, and I thought he's probably the only one that was thinking right. I wouldn't agree with his theology about a lot of things. I wouldn't agree, no doubt, with his biblical positions on a lot of things, but I agree with that. And he said that juniors and seniors in high school, at the Monterey High School, as long as I'm principal, will not have a prom or dancing. And boy, he was a very unpopular person for many years. I'm telling you, brethren, when I was in school, especially some of the shorts that we wore on the basketball team, as I look back, man, now they drag down to the knees. I like that. But boy, when I was in school, I didn't think anything about it. But they were very, very short. Things change. Time changes. And I'm here to tell you, brethren, we've got to think not only about you, but you've got to think about your children. You don't want to put them in a predicament. It's not, you don't have the responsibility as parents to want your children to be popular. You want your children to be faithful. You want your children to be taught right. You want them to be trained right. And so sometimes we try to get too vain in the way that we rear our children. Let's get back to the basics. Let's get back to the first principles of how to raise our children. That's one of the things that we're going to be doing in our class on Wednesday night, on parenting. We're going to talk about a lot of practical things that we need to be doing in the home that starts at a very early age. And we are responsible of how our children are going to turn out. And if you'll start at a very early age, and not only will you teach them right, but you'll be the right example, and never encourage them to wear something that is immoral or ungodly or go somewhere that's going to be a problem for them. Sometimes I'm afraid we parents want to be our children's best friends instead of being the parent. I'm afraid sometimes that we are afraid because they won't fit in with a cool group that we give in and we allow them to do things that we know that we shouldn't allow them to do. I want to, again, borrow something. There was a principal, his name was Kenneth Hoagland of Kiltonburg High School, who recently canceled the prom. And this is what he said. It's not primarily the sex, this was in 2007, not primarily the sex, the booze, the drugs that surrounded this event, as problematic as that might be. It is rather the flaunting of affluence, assuming the exaggerated expenses, a pursuit of vanity for vanity's sake. In a word, it's financial decadence. Now, I want you to show you something right here. Can you see how that sometimes that we're trying to outdo each other? There are people that can't afford it that will literally spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars on getting their kids a particular dress that we think they look good, they look attractive, they look sharp to the world. That's the reason, brethren, we've got to be careful. Think about it, parents. There's so many things out in the world that we can do, that we can allow our children to do, without having to encourage them to go to the prom and to go to a dance. You know, I couldn't have preached this sermon 25 years ago because I grew up and I never got to hear lessons like this. The first time I preached on going to the prom, it made parents mad. Probably making some of you mad today, but some of you may have been to the prom. Some of you parents may have been to the prom. And now you're rethinking it. You're saying, you know, well, maybe he's right. Maybe let me do a little more thinking about it. Let me do a little bit more study. I hope you'll take that position. When you think about your influence in the community, isn't that supposed to be first and foremost your responsibility to be the shining light and the salt of the earth? Now, look at 74% of teenagers surveyed report pressure to drink, according to this website that I got on. 45% pressure to drink and to ride and drive with someone who has been drinking. Wow. 49% of teenagers report using drugs. I got on a particular website that a member of the church, the Lord's church, and they were asking local teenagers that were juniors and seniors and those that had gone to the prom after they graduated, and many of them confessed that they had never tasted beer, they had never tasted alcohol, and they never smoked a joint or used drugs until prom night. They said they just wanted to get the feeling, just experience it. And every one of them said that they wished they hadn't have done that. There's a lot of things we can do in life that we look back on it, so maybe we shouldn't have done it. Maybe that wasn't wise. So what I'm saying to young parents is, don't wait until you become parents of teenagers to make these decisions. Go ahead and decide right now that I'm not going to allow my children to do this. Well, somebody says, well, why would you want to rob your children? You go to school with these kids all your whole life, and now one of the most important events, who made it the most important event? Who declared it the most important event? Not the most important event. The most important event of high school is getting to graduate. Who declared that? Let me give you an alternative, brethren. Is there life without a prom? Yes. Prom alternative. Prom alternative. And parents, you ought to encourage your children now to be involved in prom alternative. Right now, you ought to make that decision. Mark Newberry, the deacon over our youth. If you're interested in that, why don't you talk to Mark about it? When we do prom alternative here, it's not something that we take lightly. It is a big thing. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of money that does not come out of the church treasury, that individuals support this in order to provide good, wholesome fun and entertainment. I know a lot of times they've gone to Nashville, they've gone to eat with a real nice place, they have gone out on a riverboat, they've done a lot of nice things. Why? Not because they don't want you to have fun, but it's fun that's geared around Christians where there's not going to be the temptation of dressing, or it shouldn't be a temptation of dressing right, and there's not a temptation of being able to go out with somebody and use alcohol and drugs and to dance. So is there life without a prom? Yes. This particular website that I read, member of the church, it said this, that some children did not want to go to the prom. But because they were very popular at school, their parents made them to go and even rented them a big, nice limo in order to go to the prom. And the children didn't even want to do that. Well, first of all, if my children wanted to go to the prom and they asked me to go, I wouldn't let them go, but I'd explain to them why. I wouldn't give them permission to go. But what I would encourage them to do is to do this right here. Let's do prom alternative. Let's make this thing good. Let's make it the best we've ever made it. Let's let our community, let's let our schools know, if they wonder why you're not there, just say, well, we had our own prom alternative. Now, what are some common arguments? Someone might say that dancing may turn other people, or may turn on other people, or excite other people, but I didn't react that way, and I don't react that way, and it's on them. That's their fault. Brethren, the modern dance today, the handling of a male and female, if you don't think it incites lust, you have forgotten what it's like to be a 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old young man. Number two, I can't control what other people do. Whatever they think about me, whatever they say about me, if they look at, even if I'm not dressed like you think I ought to, if it's showing a little bit, hey, it's not my fault, that's on them. I can't control what they think. Well, let's look at a scripture. In Romans 14, verses 12 and 13, so then let each of us give an account of himself unto God. Therefore let us not judge one another anymore, but rather, watch this, resolve this, not to put a stumbling block or a cause to fall in a brother's way. Look at that idea. We're not supposed to do anything to cause our brother to stumble. Let me ask you a question. Would you be embarrassed if our school had a prom alternative and they asked your preacher, Jack Honeycutt, to come over and be one of the chaperones? Would you be embarrassed for me to be there? Would you think, well, I don't know if that's the place he ought to be? People would think kind of bad that you're the chaperone you're the preacher and you're coming over there. What's the difference between me and you? What's the difference between us? If it's something wrong for me, or if it's something maybe that's questionable about me doing it, why can you do it? Regardless of your age. See, brethren, the thing about it is, as Christians, we shouldn't see how close we can get to something without being wrong and sinful. And a lot of this thing, and excuse me if I'm wrong, but a lot of this is because we as parents sometimes have become too vain in our thinking toward our children. It should not be that way. Be the parent that teaches your children that do not put a stumbling block in the life of someone else. How can anything go wrong if it's tightly supervised? Steve Hickenbotham on his website said that it was televised on local TV, and the immorality and the ungodliness and the things going on, and it was chaperoned. Does that mean that sin can't be participated in even when there's an adult there? Well, sure it can. Not only that, the problem is the boy, not me. Let me ask you a question. Would you want your boy and your girl to touch one another in a place or in a way that is not good, not healthy, not wholesome, that could create a problem that could lead to something else? I'm trying to be very discreet. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't want them to pull in somewhere in a dark place. Of course you wouldn't. Well, what's the difference between grabbing someone in a way and making a movement? How could that be right? And the problem is the boy, and the problem is the girl that's participating in it. That's the problem. And it's always the problem. Not only that, dancing is mentioned in the Bible. Why, how many times have I heard that? Well, what's the big deal? They danced in the Bible. Yes, they did dance in the Bible. Let me give you a good example of Herodes' daughter, Salome. And look at what happened. It caused Herod to do something that he was very sorry for. It cost John the Baptist his life, his head, and he was beheaded because of the pleasure he got from this dance. It was wrong. It was sinful. People scoff at the Word of God. Galatians 5, Ethan read for us, and you look at the word of lewdness, you look at the word of lasciviousness, ungodly bodily movements, and you don't have to be dancing to do that. The way you walk into a building could cause lasciviousness. And if that doesn't cover it, then put the big circle under such like. Such like. Anything such like. The parents have to make the decisions in the home, not the children. And I promise you, if you'll make the right decision, you'll never have to live with the guilt and the shame and the embarrassment. I wished I'd have done that different. I wished I'd have handled that differently. We've got so many things that we can do that's fun. We've got so many things in our lives as young people. We don't want to rob you. We don't want you to not play ball. We don't want you to go out and have a good time as long as it's wholesome, it's right. But what we want you to do is to do the right thing, to teach your children the right way, make them dress properly, and don't let them choose their own clothes. You choose their clothes that is not tight-fitting and not going to reveal something that's going to cause a real problem. God says it all, to abstain from all appearance of evil. Being a parent, it's not easy, I promise you. It's hard. And I know some of you are expecting babies, and we can't wait till you get those babies. You're going to love them. You're going to do all you can to teach them right, and I appreciate that very much. You want them to go to heaven, I appreciate that very much. Some of you have got children. It's going into the pre-teen years. You're going on in. Some of you already at the teenage years. All your parents are trying to do is to make decisions that will help you get to heaven and to have you to live right and to live in such a way that you can bring honor to the Lord and the Lord's church and not bring shame and reproach. Think about it, parents. Think about it, teenagers. Think about your decisions. You're smart enough to know what's right and wrong. One of the things that I had on there that I didn't talk about, and this is the way I want to close. In Galatians 5, you got the works of the flesh, verses 19 through 21. Verses 22 through 25, you got the fruit of the Spirit. Let me ask you a question. Immodesty, dancing, prom, would it fit under the work of the flesh, or would it go under the category of the fruit of the Spirit? Be honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself. Which one of those would it fit under? When you come into the assembly or you go to a ball game and people say, wow, look at the way they're dressed. Don't hardly have anything on. That's the reason you've got to be careful. If you're going to go to the beach, you need to properly dress yourself. Don't go down there with a bikini on. Don't go down there with a two-piece and show yourself off to the world. I don't have to have the world to decide whether my child's pretty or not. I know she's beautiful. I know he's beautiful. He's handsome. Why? Because he's made in the image and likeness of God. And I want him to have good morals and good values and good principles. And it's my responsibility at a very early age with my children to instill that in them, even if the world thinks we're crazy. The world's not raising my children. That happened one time when my boy said, why does an elder son, when he played ball at a place, another location, why does an elder son get to miss Wednesday night and I don't, I can't. I'm not raising him, I'm raising you. If you ask him today, he would say, that was a wise decision. At 15 years old, he thought I was crazy. Most 15-year-olds think like that. I did. Think about your soul. Think about trying to be good examples and getting your children to heaven. If we can help you today, if you're not a child of God, why not start out this year in serving the Lord by obeying the gospel, repenting of your sins, confessing that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and being baptized for the forgiveness of your sins. And if you've done that and you have become weak, you are struggling, and maybe you've made the wrong decisions in your life and you just need to be forgiven. We'll pray with you. We love you. We care about you. We bid you to come right now while together we stand as we sing.